Alright, hello citizens of the Nigelverse. It is Nigel here once again, and this is going to be another movie review. So, we are continuing our look at the adventures of the Man of Steel. Oh, and you know what? Last movie, hey, if I can address Superman 2 really quickly, I mentioned that Richard Donner did 75% of the movie, directed 75% of the movie, and it was almost done. But Richard or Lester came in, the new director. Her came in. A lot of people are upset about it. At least behind the scenes, um, but came in and reshot all of it, and I actually didn't know this until after I made my video and everything. But there actually exists a Richard Donner cut, so we definitely will have to go back and watch that. But we will go back and watch that at some point. But now this movie, Richard Donner, totally has nothing to do with this. This time it's all Richard Lester. So Richard Lester has to stand on his own. How will he do? Let's find out. I'm of course talking about Superman 3. So as always, I'm not professional movie reviewer, movie analyst, or anything like that. Just a man who enjoys a good time, and I had an okay time with this movie. For a lot of people, this kind of was the downward spiral. When it came to this particular Superman series, this Superman movie and the next one weren't received as well by people as the first two. Let's find out why. So without further ado, let's get right into it. And if you've seen these reviews of mine before, you kind of already know how this works. If you haven't, I'm going to be talking about what I liked and disliked about the movie, and as well as do a plot summary. So we will start off with the plot summary. So, pretty much, first first thing I have to mention in this first part, the first part of the movie is pretty much like a series of not just gags, but also getting some Superman stuff, such as when he saves someone from from drowning in their car, or a fire hydrant shoots up into the car through a series of accidents, and causing Superman to swoop in and save him, and Superman does do that. But otherwise, the opening is very chaotic, very much a series of mostly kind of funny funny haha gags, like like a blind man with a seeing eye dog accidentally loses his dog, loses track of his dog after another dog comes. So the dog chases the other dog, which service dogs. I actually don't know if I usually know service dogs are very well trained, so that's very rare, but it does happen for the sake of the gag. So he pushes around on the little machine that they use to create that has the road paint in it for the dotted lines along the road. So stuff like that. Had otherwise. Yeah, so very much a series of gags. What purpose does it serve? Who knows? But now getting into the regular plot itself of we see Gus Gorman and aka August Gorman, and who starts off in the movie. They actually start off with that before we get the series of the gags and stuff, and just funny moments. And he's currently unemployed, getting unemployment benefits, but they cut him off for it. So now he's got to find a actual job. He's hired at Websco. As a computer programmer. And it turns out he's really solid at but it feels like he isn't getting paid enough. So what does he do? He decides to embezzle some money, and rather than be fired, or like he probably should have been, and instead Ross Webster, who is our protagonist for this movie, decides to bring us on and they do it through blackmail. So now Gus is working for Webster here, and I do have the plot here in the wiki. Yeah, to for reference to help, just in case I miss any points. But nevertheless, meanwhile, at the Daily Planet, Clark is going to visit Smallville. It's his high school reunion, and so he's going to visit Smallville, and he's taking Jimmy Olsen along with him. And meanwhile, Lois Lane won a vacation to Bermuda. So, right off the bat, let's address something kind of big. So I mentioned a lot of people were upset when Richard Donner was out and Richard Lester was in. One of those people was Margot Kidder, who plays Lois Lane, and you can tell, this definitely, he probably is a combination of not just retaliation, but also Margot Kidder, not being a big fan of the new guy, Richard Lester, or to the point where her Lois Lane's involvement is pretty minimal in this. I imagine the vacation to Bermuda was written in for Lois Lane to be gone for most of the movie, because she is gone for like a good 95% of the movie. She's in like the opening in the Daily Bugle, not the Daily Bugle, the Daily Planet, I should say. And then she comes back heck at the end in the Daily Planet. So, otherwise she is gonzo for or pretty much the entire movie, essentially. Meanwhile, as Clark and Jimmy Olsen, so because Lois is out now, Clark is hanging with Jimmy Olsen, which I don't mind Jimmy Olsen. Like obviously his character he's very young, very, I don't necessarily want to say naive, but a bit childlike in a way, but which I guess is naivety, in some ways. But anyway, as they're headed to Smallville, there's a chemical plant fire. So Superman shows up to put it out, and it almost caught, and the fire almost causes the explosion. And because the plant contains unstable electric acid, which can't overheat or else it'll essentially blow the place sky high. So Superman has to save everyone, and it's the coolest thing. This is a pretty cool way of doing it. He freezes the lake and picks up kind of piece of the lake, the part that he froze off. So he essentially has a frozen piece. He freezes the lake and then brings it over, douses it in the fire so it rains and essentially puts out the fire, which is admittedly pretty cool. But that Beltric acid will definitely come back later on. Meanwhile, at the high school reunion, Clark runs into Lana Lang, and who's pretty much like his childhood friend slash not necessarily high school sweetheart, maybe high school crush. Like, it's supposed to be implied that Clark was crushing on her and everything. And so she's kind of running the event, helping run the event, hence the reunion that but he finds out that not only is she divorced, but she has a child as well. But she also has an ex-boyfriend, a very drunk, obnoxious ex-boyfriend known as Brad Wilson, who will be appearing quite a bit within the movie. So Clark, while he's in Smallville, is hanging out with them, and it's to the point where Ricky, who is Lana's son, almost dies by going into a combine harvester. So Ricky's out playing in the field while they're having their picnic and everything. Ricky is out playing in the field, and accidentally trips and hits his head after he goes looking for his dog. His dog runs off, so he goes looking for him and almost dies, essentially, not just from busting his head open, which there is blood trickling down as well. So definitely head injury, obviously, which not the first injury, because Jimmy Olsen, and I forgot to mention, trying to take pictures of the chemical fire was up on the was up on the crane, trying to take pictures, but it accidentally fell down and broke his leg. So his leg is banged up, but now Ricky's banged up as well. But Superman swoops in and saves the day. He saves him from the combine harvester, or and meanwhile we go back. Heck, and this is kind of how it's listed on the wiki. Things aren't always quite in order when it comes to the wiki, so it may go back and forth on some stuff. So, well, some stuff does kind of happen, and kind of does a little bit of weaving in and out, and we kind of saw that with the plot summary when it came to the second Superman movie as well. Oh, but meanwhile, uh, oh, uh, oh, Ross Webster's first assignment for Gus is pretty much to get back at Columbia, because as Columbia doesn't want to do business with him when it comes to coffee, and Webster wants that coffee. So his response to it is to mess with the satellite. Right, so they have a satellite up in space. He's pretty much to redirect that to cause storms in Columbia to ruin their crop, which is what Webster does, and so that's done. So that Webster can then bring in his own coffee, essentially. So, oh, oh, uh, oh, he's scheming to do that, so he tasks Gus with that. If some of Webster's kind of mannerisms slash like schemes are kind of sounding familiar, I'm pretty sure there's a reason for that, and maybe you're starting to pick up on it. But we'll definitely talk about it more later on when I get into my likes and dislikes, because it definitely is something to talk about. So Gus does it. Hit after accidentally after accidentally first messing with some traffic lights, and messing with an ATM as well. But to his credit, he is inebriated. He needed to inebriate both himself and Brad. So that's because Gus heads to Smallville, and that's small town, so that he essentially wouldn't be noticed, so that he can keep a low profile. But he's there. He uses the computer there. Gets Brad drunk and everything. Brad has the drinking problem and everything. Gus nevertheless uses his that computer to cause a storm and ruin the crops until Superman shows up and redirects the storm. So they decide that Superman needs to be dealt with. So they have Gus create kryptonite. They have him try to break down its chemical structure, and Gus, when trying to break down the chemical structure of the kryptonite, traces it back to its origin, and obviously because kryptonite comes from Krypton, which blew up. So Gus traces it, but finds an unknown piece, but he does substitute for tar, and he's inspired to do so by looking at his pack of cigarettes. So he just puts in tar, and gets the kryptonite developed, and so he's going to use that to essentially kill Superman. At least he thinks so. Meanwhile, because Ricky was saved by Superman, he told all his friends at school that Superman is going to appear at his birthday party. Now, on one hand, yes, very irresponsible, but on the other hand, A, it's childlike, and B, if I said I got saved by Superman, and I probably would have spread that rumor too. To all my friends, like, yeah, Superman, he's gonna be there, totally, yeah. So Lana talks to Clark to tell Superman, because as Clark has told her that he and Superman are close, which he's not technically wrong about, but tells her that he and Superman are close, so that Superman's going to be there at the party. And sure enough, Superman shows up, and they throw a whole big party for Superman's arrival. They give him a cake and everything. But Gus does show up, gives Superman the kryptonite, and He shows up in a tank and everything alongside alongside Webster's assistant and slash sister. Her, so they dress up like generals and everything, as part of the military. So they give Superman the kryptonite, but and at first they think it doesn't do anything, but it turns out it does, because then and Superman becomes evil. Well, essentially, he pretty much totally changes personality. Well, hey, I guess that kryptonite has the same effect as a symbiote from Spider-Man. But nevertheless, Superman commits, it's as the wiki describes it, petty acts of vandalism, aka pretty much minor inconveniences, such as straightening the Leaning Tower of Pisa and blowing out the Olympic flame, aimed as the guy's about to light it. So more kind of comedy gags there. With the Leaning Tower of Pisa, so the story actually with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and I know this because I learned it in Italian class, that that's originally how the tower was supposed to be. It was supposed to be just a straight regular tower, but because the foundation of it was unstable, it ended up leaning. But it became so iconic that eventually they had the lean corrected so that it still leaned, but it leaned at an acceptable level to where it wouldn't topple over. But now apparently it may topple over, and the Olympic flame one, that's just messed up. Like Superman waited, he literally waited until the dude was about to light it before blowing it out. That's cold, Superman. That's cold. And so Superman is now pretty much not necessarily evil, a little bit more so selfish, doesn't care about the people anymore, or turns heel essentially. But us once more, and he gives his demand to Ross Webster, saying, "Hey, if you want me to continue working for you, I want a supercomputer built." Well, and this supercomputer, if my camera would stop, I'm doing that. Thank you. But this supercomputer essentially is going to be one of the greatest computers. Going to have its own self-defense techniques. He's pretty much be able to do anything and everything that it's commanded to do, and and it's going to be able to defend itself and everything. And so Gus wants that built, but of course Webster knows that. Because he's told by Gus, like, hey, it'll do anything I tell it to do, and therefore it'll do anything you tell me to tell it to do. Who hit his words, not mine. But essentially, this supercomputer will be able to do just about anything. So Gus wants that, and so Webster's like, sure, let's build it. Once he's able to get something out of it, meanwhile, Superman's continuing to cause trouble. And one of the things is that, and this plays into, Webster's schemes, pretty much to redirect all the ships carrying oil to just stop and stand in one spot, and just stand there menacingly. But nevertheless, one of the ships decides not to do so. So Webster entrusts Lorelei, his assistant, in order to cause an oil spill. So he takes the oil. The ship is headed for Metropolis to provide oil and everything to Metropolis, but Superman and takes out the ship. It pretty much causes it to leak oil and cause the big oil spill. Now the oil spills, and now the oil is held up, and it's not going anywhere. So now that had not Gus, but Webster is able to bring in his own oil, and essentially he profit off of it. Which is funny, because as someone in like literally like the next scene, as Superman's continuing his selfish ways, is describing that somebody profits off of this, even if all the oil is gone, which it is obviously, because the other ships are stopped, and then the other ship has the big oil spilling all its oil. That somebody still profits off it. That guy was closer to the truth that you realize, and you do see Gus starting to get that sense of guilt and that sense of remorse. Meanwhile, Superman's continuing his selfish ways, now in a bar, pretty much causing more trouble, flicking peanuts and causing beer bottles to break. But then storms out the bar and essentially fully loses it, especially with Ricky calling out Superman, saying, "No, Superman's not evil. He's just in a slump. Superman, and come back, be good again." So that causes Superman to separate himself from Clark Kent. So the Superman and Clark Kent duke it out, pretty much like the good side versus the evil side, and ultimately Clark does come out victorious. Is pretty much stopping his evil self and becoming good Superman again. And it's funny because like the evil Superman has more of like a maroon shade of red for his outfits as opposed to the regular bright red, and which, if I'm not mistaken, was pretty much the color scheme that they went for. The maroon and everything is kind of the color scheme they went for, if I'm not mistaken, for like Superman Returns. And so sure, why not? But nevertheless, Superman has become good again, and he cleans up the oil spill, and goes to confront Webster. First, he goes to Lorelei, but then Webster lures him in, and at first, and it's supposed to be a trap because they then launch missiles at him. So Superman and evades the missiles. Well, shows up in their base, which is when the computer analyzes his weakness and produces a beam of kryptonite, pure kryptonite. They got it right this time. But ultimately, Gus has a change of heart, and fully. Fully he destroys the kryptonite beam. He tries to do it first by cutting the power, but then the machine powers itself back on by sucking up the electricity from essentially the world, pretty much. But then Gus destroys the machine, and then pretty much the rest of the movie is them trying to stop the machine. Hera, which again is Webster's assistant slash sister, or she becomes a robot, and tries to take out both Webster and Lorelei. But Superman then shows up with the Beltric acid. I told you it would be important, so he places it in the thing. The machine tries to fight him and choke him out, but the Beltric acid overheats because of all the power from the machine, and it ultimately destroys the machine slash computer, what have you. So the day is saved. The machine is destroyed. It's Superman and drops Gus off, and at first Superman tries to get Gus a job at the coal mine, but Gus is like, nah, forget that. Had starting new life and everything, but also tries to capitalize off of Superman's name and everything. But Superman also has a piece of coal, turns it into a diamond. And he like crushed it with his hands and turns it into a diamond. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's more steps, but it's Superman. But pretty much grabs a diamond and goes back to Lana, gives her the diamond ring. So the story earlier in the movie is that Lana had to pawn off her diamond ring and everything. So Clark gives her a new one, says it's a gift from Superman, and moves Lana out to Metropolis to start her life there, and she begins working as Perry White's secretary within the Daily Planet, and Lois is jelly a little bit, but Superman sets things right. He does fix the oil spill that he caused from earlier, or he corrects the leaning tower of Pisa so that it's leaning again, and kind of funny, he the gag is when the tower is first corrected when Superman was evil. Well, there's a guy selling statues of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and he gets upset, destroys the statues, but then he gets the straightened statues to represent the new tower. But Superman tilts the tower again, so the guy gets upset again and destroys the statue, and Superman flies off into space once again. And that is pretty much the plot of Superman 3. Now to go into what I like and dislike about the movie. Starting with what I like a lot of the stuff that works within the first two movies for the most part still works in this movie. Superman still characterized. We see him and we see his inner conflict. Adding kind of the inner struggle with kind of the evil Superman is kind of cheesy and kind of corny, but it does add some depth to Superman's character, and if anything, it's a precursor for all the Superman is evil plot lines, such as Injustice and stuff like that. But Superman having the conflict with himself, otherwise still being our very heroic Superman, and of course, and and still retaining a lot of his morals. Thankfully, and I think a lot of this does come down to Christopher Reeve's acting, that Superman doesn't get necessarily boring. Like, it's still fun, not only to see him save the day and everything, but to see him and Clark still interacting as people, while still having kind of that awkward tension with the love interest that he kind of has, they had with Lois and now has with Lana. But otherwise, I think that's still pretty well done. In terms of what I didn't quite like as much about the movie, I don't necessarily want to say everything else, but had a lot of stuff. So, one of the things that people didn't really like about this movie is that it does rely a lot more on comedy. It's funny though, because as a lot of people will say, this one, and like that was one of the criticisms for this movie, is that it's very campy, which is kind of how the series was to this point. I mean, Superman literally threw a giant S onto Zod, but an S that he peeled off of his chest, but yeah, it doesn't quite hit the same, and I think that also comes down to the villain. Like, if you haven't guessed already, just by his motives and stuff of as well as the people surrounding him, they're essentially filling the roles of like Lex Luthor and his friends. Like, you got the main baddie, the rich guy who wants all the power and everything. Then you have his assistant. It's not quite as bumbling as Otis and Miss Tessmacher, but it's still kind of in that dimension with Vera and Lorelei and everything, as well as now Gus, who's brought on board. Then you have a character who makes the change of heart and helps out Superman, and it feels very much rehashed, like very much copied and pasted. Like it's one thing to base your character, and which Ross Webster is an original character for the movie. It doesn't really work out because he's pretty much like Lex 2.0. And he essentially just as another rich guy who wants to see the world burn. But at least with Lex, he also had the intelligence factor as well, and a lot more of that I don't necessarily want to say charm, but kind of that presence about him, at least as a character, which made him a lot more compelling than Webster. Webster doesn't really hit the mark for me, and when it comes to the character of Gus, I was like, I'm kind of at a crossroads. On one hand, I love Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor is probably one of the funniest stand-up comedians ever, and definitely a funny guy. But I think the way the character is written is really weird. They kind of try to do two things at once. They kind of try to make him kind of a, not necessarily player, but arrogant to an extent, and kind of try to make him a bit kind of. I'm trying to find the best way to describe it. A bit kind of selfish in some regards, hurts, but also nerdy and having like a change of heart and still kind of trying to be a good person, like in over his head. I think what they want to do is tell the story of like, hey, this guy did like some bad things, but then what had even worse people and had kind of change of heart because of that. I think that's the direction they wanted to go, but ultimately I think they missed the mark with it because it doesn't come off the way it's supposed to, or the way I'm sure it was intended to. And it had a lot of potential, like to see Gus. If Gus kind of was like a guy who made that mistake, like and then and got roped into it, I think it would have worked a little bit better. But instead, he very deliberately steals the money, commits the embezzlement, and then they kind of try to do the whole, oh, he's kind of this not as bad a guy in over his head. But I think it gets lost in translation. And yeah, like I hate to see he would Gus as a character, if they kept everything the same but paired him with Lex Luthor, would it have worked? I don't think so. Oh but yeah, so his character is written pretty weird. Again, that sucks because I do love Richard Pryor, and Lois is not really getting too much screen time. And is pretty unfortunate. But they do have Lana Lang in her place. Lana Lang essentially is filling that part of Lois, just like our main villains are filling the parts of like Lex Luthor and the other villains. And Lana Lang is essentially this movie's Lois. Is nobody tell Peter Griffin, but she's essentially this movie's version of Lois Lang, kind of just being the love interest in everything. Like I think it's an interesting dynamic having them be old high school friends reconnecting and seeing them interact and everything, but I don't think it works quite as well as I would have hoped. And the whole evil Superman thing is kind of cheesy and corny in a way. I do kind of get it, but but it is kind of weird, admittedly. Which we see all the Bully Maguire memes. Where's my bully Christopher Reeves? These guys, come on. This Superman isn't necessarily evil, just more so a jerk. But yeah, where's my bully Christopher Reeves memes at? But it does play into the inner conflict, but I don't think it works quite as well. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I could just totally be rambling like Nigel. We have no idea what you're talking about, but just the way the character is set up is kind of weird. It adds that extra dimension to Superman, and I guess that kryptonite, while not weakening him, brings out the worst traits of his personality. He's pretty much like the symbiote, but I don't think. Um, I don't think it quite he hits the mark as well as it was supposed to or should have. And then some of the effects are still kind of cheesy, but I will say this: the effects definitely are stepped up quite a bit from the previous movies. Is that I will give this movie? The effects are sometimes still pretty cheesy, but they have stepped it up big time and when it comes to that, which obviously different year, different technology, which is nice to see. But sadly, yeah, this one kind of fell flat for me. Like I think too much stuff got rehashed. Like they didn't do anything original. Like if they excuse me, if they did something a bit original, a bit more original, or even brought in a more established villain. You have other villains for Superman, such as Brainiac or Metallo. I'm not sure if Metallo was around at the time, or Brainiac or Metallo. Or if you're gonna create an original villain, don't have it be a rehash. Like do something interesting. Like okay, if you're gonna go the evil Superman route, have evil Superman take the center stage instead of being kind of an afterthought. And just like the other movies, the Superman and the main villain and do kind of meet each other way too late into the movie. Are you beginning to notice a pattern here? They meet each other way late into the movie, not until the pretty much the final scene, and then they also kind of try to shove the computer also in that like main villain slot pretty much at the end of the movie, like the twist villain. But it's kind of late into the movie that it almost kind of falls on deaf ears. Yeah, that was Superman 3. He but Nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video so you can see as soon as it drops. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts on the movie and my review. Did you like Superman 3? Did you like my review of Superman 3? Am I being too harsh on the movie? Am I not being harsh enough? Let me know. Also, we have a couple more stops to make on the Superman tour. Or so obviously we're gonna review Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, and this one's only an hour and a half. Oh boy. Yeah, so we're gonna do that. And we're gonna do Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, and then because it is kind of a spiritual successor in a way, and I think it's supposed to be intended to be a sequel, we're also gonna look at Superman Returns. But so expect those within the coming weeks or so. I'll probably have the Superman series wrapped up around on March or April. Also, we're almost there. We're chugging along and everything. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.